Hey, Lance Egan here with Fly Fish Food. Today I want to show you a new hopper that uses cylinder foam like the Bionic Ant. Check it out. It's called the Bionic Hopper. This one's the tan version.
Dude, that's a big brown.
Alright, let's get started tying the Bionic Hopper. This is the tan version. As I mentioned, these are available in purple, pink, yellow, and this one is, again, the tan. To start us off, I've got a hook in the vise. This is a Tiemco 100, size 10. You can tie these in any size you like, as small or as large as you like. Commercially, they'll be available 8, 10, and 12. Because I'm going to be using some foam on this, I need a fairly strong thread, so I've got some Danville 140. This particular color they call beige, I believe. It's kind of a lighter tan color. Anything in a stronger thread that's kind of tan would do the trick. I'm just going to start the thread here on the Tiemco 100, size 10, work it back towards the bend of the hook, get rid of the excess. And the first thing I'm going to do is a little unorthodox for a hopper, and that is I'm going to tie in some orange, some hot orange, UV orange, fluorescent orange, whatever orange color or crystal flash you like. I'm just going to grab 2 strands of it. Can't tell those are 2 strands, but there you go. 2 strands of it. I'm just going to pinch them and capture them with the thread. Then fold them over so that they're locked in, can't move anywhere. Try and get them a little bit centered on the hook. Tie them off, give them a little bit of a trim. Just short, doesn't need to be long. It's not half the length of the shank. It's probably even like 3/4 the length of the gap between the shank and the point of the hook. Pretty short. In fact, I might even make them a little bit shorter. I like these to be pretty short. It's just a little tiny hot spot. A lot of hoppers, you may have noticed, have a little bit of orange or a little red to them. You could do this with red crystal flash too. I've even put red hackle fibers in that place. Just something to give them a little bit of a hot spot at the back end of the fly. All right, next up we're going to tie in the foam. This foam is just these foam cylinders. These are Wapsi foam cylinders. These, for this particular size 10 hook, this is a 3/16 inch. They come pre-cut for you. You can even see they have some segmentation to them. I really like that. As they're cutting them out with the little drill, they end up with a little ridges on them that you can see, which actually add a little bit of segmentation to the fly. I'm going to tie this foam cylinder in. I like cylinders for this. This is where this fly gets its name, much like the Bionic Ant. They both use foam cylinders for the body. And I think that this does a very good job of imitating the abdomen of a grasshopper, which is kind of round in shape. So before I tie this in, it's just got a blunt end. I'm going to give it a little adaptation. I'm going to grab the tip of it and cut with the butt of my scissors down one side to make kind of a flat spot like that. Then I'm going to cut angles on each side, like so, to just kind of create a little bit of a tapered end to that segment. Next, when I tie this in, I don't really want to tie it in back here where my thread is. I want to tie it in just in front of this hump. I need to leave a little bit of space there to create a larger segment, and I don't want it to lay down in the back. I want it to kind of stand up. So I'm going to tie it in just a little ahead of where I tied in that crystal flash. So I'm going to find the flat part of that foam. I'm going to give this a little bit of a pinch with my fingers to try and make it easier to tie in. And I'm going to try my best so that when I tie it in that flat side is nice and down. Make a little bit of a tapered end to it. I'm just going to hold it in place, pull with the thread as I'm wrapping. It's going to naturally want to walk towards you, towards the camera. So I started a little bit on my side, but I want to end up with it. There you go. If I pull too hard, it'll walk all the way over. I want to end up with it right on top of the hook. So I'm just adding some tension. Then I'm going to wrap some without the foam and then come back to the foam with tension again. And I'm going to now enlarge that segment and really lock that down. Once it's really in place, it really shouldn't walk around the hook very much. I've got that flat spot where I want it. It's angling up slightly. It's going to get pushed down a little bit more by the time I'm done, but it's in good shape for now. All right, next up, we're going to add the foam wing. The foam wing in this case is just 2 mil flat brown foam. This is just a sheet of it. I've then cut a strip of it. that is a little bit wider so that when I tie this in, you can see the brown kind of showing on all sides of the fly. I want this to kind of contrast the tan foam on that wing. So I just tied it. It's just cut flat. Then I'm going to take my scissors and trim an angle cut there and an angle cut here, like so. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a nice little tapered end. Then we're going to lay this over the top, and I want the end of it to be just longer than the tan foam cylinder. So I'm going to lay it in like that, try and roll this around with my fingers so that it wraps nice and round. Capture it with the thread, like so. Lay it in nice and tight right on top. Make sure I didn't move my cylinder around too much. We're looking good. Got a little strand of thread there. Now I'm going to try and make this segment a little bit wider so I can add a wing and some legs. If that segment is too narrow, the legs don't want to lay back the way I want them to. So I'm going to make this segment just a tiny bit wider, like so. Now you can see where we're at. This foam wing is covering the cylinder, nice and tapered. We got double layers of foam. When I'm all done, I can kind of prop that back up, but looking good for now. Okay, the next step is to add the wing on top. Instead of the foam wing, we just added, I'm going to add a visible wing, which is just some trigger point. EP trigger point is what I'm using here. You could use McFly-Alon, you could use Parapost wing, you could use Widow's Web, any of those types of products. I've just pulled some of this away from the hank, and I'm going to just capture it with the thread, try and push it towards the eye end of my tie-in point there. Maybe do one more wrap to hold that in place. Make sure I collect all the fibers up top. I don't want them wrapping around to the side. Then I'm going to push on it towards the wing just a little bit. You can see I'm kind of pushing it forward. I want to do that just to capture it with the thread and really lock it into place. So now I've kind of tied over it, and it's now got tension, and it's going to hold and lay in and stay right on top of the hook. Then I'm going to come back and trim this just shorter than that brown foam wing. I don't really want the fish necessarily to see the white, although I don't really think that they care. This is more just a visible indicator for me. You could add this in pink or in orange if you had a harder time finding the white. The white for me is a nice color option that's not too overt, and it's easy for me to find. Okay, now we have our wing in place. Next up, we're going to add the legs. This is a critical part of this fly. Not necessarily this exact leg, but the length of the leg. These legs are MFC Sexy Floss. This is barred Sexy Floss in tan. This is a medium size for this size 10. You could use hairline barred rubber legs, MFC centipede legs, whichever legs you like for your hopper would work. I favor this particular one. I like the sheen on the Sexy Floss. I like how wiggly they are, and I like that they are very durable. They last longer than the rubber legs that you find on lots of hoppers. If you've ever pulled a hopper out of your box that's been in there a couple of years and the legs kind of crumble off, that's probably because they're standard round rubber legs, and the rubber material just ages. It turns bad quickly, and they fall apart on your fly. So these legs I want to be long. For this fly to be kind of normal proportions, it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of like that length, and I'm going to make them probably 1.5 times longer than that. I want these legs to be long and wiggly. I've been fishing this fly a few years now, and during my testing of it, we found that this particular pattern, and most hoppers in my opinion, fish better with long wiggly legs. It just seems like it's a trigger. The shorter and more compact and fatter the legs were, the worse they worked in my experience. So I'm going to take this Sexy Floss and just elbow it in on each side, starting on my side here. And you can see that it's nice and long. The more tension I put on this, the more it pulls that leg out. And the less tension I put on it, pull too hard, I move my whole body. The less tension I put on it, the more that it lays alongside the fly. So I'm going to back that up just a little so I don't have too much tension, because I want it to flare a little, but I don't want it to be really, really 90 degrees out. I just want it kind of laying alongside the hopper. All right, we're going to leave that nice and long for now. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. Capture this one with the thread, walk it around, lay it on that far side, try and get it to the angle that I like, then wraps with that tension to hold that shape first. Then if I put more tension on towards the front, that will really flare these front legs a bit. And if they're not angled the way you want, you can kind of manipulate them with your thread. You can see I pulled it up and now it's standing out a little bit much. That looks a little better in place there. So I'll put just enough wraps and just enough tension to hold those in place. And then I will move my thread forward almost to the eye, but not quite. Next, I'm going to trim the front part of these legs. I'm going to leave the back legs long, but these front legs I'm going to trim quite a bit shorter. Let's see where we are here. Somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't want them nearly as long as the back legs. Okay, now that I've got that cut, I'm going to pull this foam cylinder over. Notice again that I'm not all the way to the eye. I don't want to tie it quite to the eye. I want it just in front. I'm going to mash that down just a little, make it a little easier to tie in. I need to leave some space there at the eye. And try and lock this in a little bit. My foam was still sliding around on me a second ago. So let's see if I can lock this segment in. You can always finish this fly by putting some head cement or super glue on the segments to really lock it to that hook shank, but this should help do that by adding a bit of tension here. Then we've got that segment tied in. Now I'm going to pull my foam wing over the top, try and kind of wrap it over the top, corral that cylinder, pinch it with my fingers, really hold it in place. I'm just going to eyeball it and make sure I didn't move that cylinder around too much yet. It still looks pretty good. Nice and clean. I'm going to widen this segment because I still got to add a wing in it and some legs. So I'm going to do a little bit of widening towards the eye of the hook and a bit more of the widening to the back of the hook. Still checking to make sure that my foam looks okay. We're still looking good. All right, next up we're going to add another wing. The same material we used before, in fact just the same strands I had before, exact same amount. You just eyeball that. You can put as much or as little on here as you like to make it easier for you to see. This adds a little flotation, but most of the flotation is coming from the foam, so we're not worried about a big, bulky, chubby Chernobyl wing unless you really want this to float. For me, I usually fish these by themselves, and so it's just crucial for me to see it. So I'm just going to take this same trigger point, lay it right over the top, capture it with the thread, then I'm going to pull these fibers back, try and capture them with the thread again, taking some care to make sure they stay right on top of the hook and making sure I still haven't messed up my foam or anything as I'm wrapping that in. We're still looking pretty good there. Now they're locked in nice and tight. I'm going to trim these about the same length as the front wing, like so. Next, we're going to pull this little foam piece over the top. That's going to help hold that wing in place. It's going to push this foam cylinder forward. You can see I've still got some room at the eye. I haven't quite wrapped all the way to the eye. That's important. I don't want to crowd that eye. I'm going to force these legs back with my fingers and hold all this in position, and then I'm just going to capture this with the thread and pull down pretty tight. With this width of thread, it won't cut through the foam very easily, like so. That makes kind of a wider segment. Looks a bit like the eyes maybe of a hopper, but more importantly, it's forcing my wing backward. Then I'm going to trim this, but I'm not going to trim it all the way off. I'm going to leave a little bit of a flap there to kind of keep that wing corralled behind it, like that. Next, we're closing in on the last segments here. We're going to add some legs, some uniflex like this. This particular color is camel. I like these legs to contrast the other legs I have on here, so I've even done these in white at times. But we're just going to take some of that uniflex like this, and we're going to cut it into small sections. I'm going to tie some legs on either side. And in that same segment, I'm just going to fold the leg over the thread, kind of walk it into place, lock it into place now with the thread. I can come back later and trim those to the length that I like, but for now I'm just going to wrap them into place, taking care to avoid the legs I already have in there, like so. Now I need to pull my other legs back, leaving just those front legs forward, and add a little bit of tension here to really lock those in. And again, you can always add super glue or head cement or whatever you like in there. Next, I'm going to walk my thread right underneath the fly to the eye of the hook. I'm going to whip finish at the eye using my trusty whip finish, the Midge whip finish from Umpqua or from Tiemco. Pull that nice and tight. Get rid of the thread. I would of course add head cement right there. We have a couple steps left and this guy's all done. The first step is to trim this cylinder to length. That creates a nice head, a nice profile to that fly. And the last step is to trim these legs. I like the front legs to be fairly short, so I'm going to give that one a pretty short clip. This one I'm going to do the same thing to. Just eyeballing those. If I always leave them long to begin with, and if they end up a little longer than I want, you can always come in and trim them again. And then these guys here, I want just a little longer, but still not very long, so I'm going to give them a trim. This one's still a bit long. We want kind of that sort of profile with really long legs in the back. These you could leave this long. I would probably leave them that long to begin with, and if they were really obnoxious, because they are quite long, you can come in and give them a little bit of a trim, but try to resist cutting those too short. The length on those I think is really important to this fly. Now if you want to get real crafty, you could come in and draw eyes on the head. You could draw some segments on the foam. I think it's already got what it needs. It's a high floating fly, it's pretty easy to see, and it sits nice and low in the water. It's one of my favorite parts about that hopper. It's got a really nice profile with those long legs, which I find to be a trigger and a key component to any hopper. I've fished this one for several years. I'm confident that if you try it, even though it looks like kind of a dumb, simple hopper, I think you'll really like the results of it. It sits pretty low, still easy to see. The fish love it. Go try it on your favorite hopper river.